Welcome to my Magic the Gathering deck review. Do Magic the Gathering. Okay, so no blue-black mill deck is complete without at least one Planeswalker. I have Jace Memory Adept. This is the one that was reprinted in M14. So, draw a card. Target player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. 0. Target player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. -7. Any number of target creatures each draw. Any number of target players each draw 20 cards. So, conceivably, I could mass win with the -7 there. So, this is a standard deck, by the way. It's Dimir Mill. And it has other cards from that aren't technically from Dimir's guild, but they're still very useful. I have one Sage's Row Denizen. Whenever another blue creature enters the battlefield under my control, target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. It's very useful. Extremely useful. Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other blue creatures. And if I wanted to, I could put copying cards in here. Those would trigger them as well. But it's a mill deck, so I'm not going to use those. Okay, so I have 2 Jace's Mindseekers. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. I may cast any one instant or sorcery from among them without paying its mana cost. So if there aren't any, obviously that doesn't happen. I do have a couple decks that don't have any instants or sorceries in them, so it's conceivable that I won't get anything either time that this happens. So I have 3 doorkeepers. I can has counting. They cost 2. 1 blue. Okay. It has 2 a blue tap. Target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of creatures with Defender I control. Which, for this deck, it would only be these 3, because those are the only 3 I have in here. And I would have 4, but I didn't feel like it was worth getting a 4th one. So, I have 2 Murkovosk Mind Drinkers, just to make it easier to get one out. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals 4 land cards and puts those cards into his or her graveyard. So it's nice to get rid of lands, and if they shuffled wrong, a whole bunch of cards. Consuming Aberration. I didn't actually go to the pre-release. I bought these promos. They're cheaper because they were given out to so many different people. Okay, so Consuming Aberration's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in my opponent's graveyards. That's the total of all my opponent's graveyards. Then, whenever I cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land card, then puts those cards into his or her graveyard. The great thing about this is if I have 2 out, both of them, that second ability on both of them will trigger. So it'll happen twice. So if I cast spells that specifically they mill until they mill a land, then it's even better. Such as if I cast Balustrade, or Balustrade, however that's said, Spy, when there's 2 of those out. Because when he enters, target player reveals the cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land card, then puts those cards into his or her graveyard. So that'd be only one person doing that twice, but it'd be worth it. Or one person doing that one more time. If I have both of them out, it'd be 3 times. So these are from Theros. Return Centaur. When it enters, target player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So just following the theme of milling. These ones, it's when they enter. This one, it's when and these 2 Mindseekers also. And then that one's when another creature enters. This one depends on defenders. This one depends on damage, and this one is just whenever you cast a spell of any kind. I really like Consuming Aberrations. I'd have 4, but I already have quite a few things that cost 5 mana or more, so I don't think I should have more than 2. So I have 4 Tome Scours, which is a 1 cost mill 5. And those are great, either at the beginning or like, oh, I have something that costs a lot, but I want to make a mill this turn. Oh, look, this only costs 1, I can do both. Sort of thing. I love cards that let me do that. I have 4 Traumatizes, which I may or may not keep all 4 in here. I might decide to sideboard some of these, but target player mills the top half rounded down of his or her library, which is worth it early game. Not so much worth it late game or after using 2 of them, but this just makes it easier to grab them. And if I can use all 4, then I can just kill them off with a Tome Scour or 3. Then I have Psychic Spiral. I shuffle my graveyard into my library and target opponent, or target player, so I could do this to myself, but I want to put that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Unfortunately, Psychic Spiral remains in the graveyard, which is why I have 2, because when it resolves, its ability happens and then it goes in the graveyard. Or its effect happens and then it goes to the graveyard. Then I have Thassa's Bounty, which is also from Theros. Draw 3 cards, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. That's useful in case I'm short on drawing things, but it does cost 6 mana, so I'd have to be short on spells and not lands. Then there's Pilfered Plans. I have 4 of these. Target player mills 2 and I draw 2, which is a better version of Thassa's Bounty because it only costs 3. Marco Vasconte to anyone with knowledge of the maze, draining the chances of the other guilds. Sweet. I will take your thoughts and use them against you. Sounds good to me. Course Confession. Target player mills 4. I draw a card for each creature milled this way. Psychic Strike. Counter target spell. That its controller mills 2. Grisly Spectacle. Destroy target creature. Its controller mills equal to its power. Destroy the Evidence. Another card that mills until they mill a land, but it destroys a land as well. So that land's controller makes that happen. So, I've used this quite a few times. I've beaten a red burn deck with it. It's like pretty much all burn spells. So I've beaten that with it. So it's really good. I'd just do a play test for you, but one, I'd be playing against myself, which means I'd be talking to myself, which is a sign of insanity, and I'd prefer not to have a sign of insanity on tape or digital recording. Although we are all insane to a point. Don't deny it, it is true. And I also don't have any camera rigging that I can use to do that because, as you can see, I only have one hand available here, which means you're not even going to be able to see me shuffle these. Sorry. Bow down and sacrebe. Please? And next time I will cover my Eldrazi deck again and show you what I finally ended up doing with it. Oh, you wanted to use that spell? Too bad it's in your graveyard.